From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump met in their first and maybe their only presidential debate on Tuesday evening. We'll tell you who we think won and what it means for the election in November. Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Paul Gigot, editorial page editor of the Journal opinion pages, and I'm here with Kyle Peterson and Bill McGurn to break down the debate and its consequences. A 90-minute debate on ABC News, moderated by David Muir and Lindsay Davis. Let's start with an exchange on the economy.
I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
The Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century.
Well, that was the one exchange on the economy, such as it was in the debate. Trump talking about inflation, but David Muir asked Harris what should have been a good exchange for Trump, whether she felt that Americans were better off than they were 4 years ago. But she ducked that and talked about her middle-class background and this or that spending giveaway that she has, Kyle. Trump never did tie her to inflation and never linked the Biden spending plan or her spending plans to inflation.
I think that was the theme of the debate overall, is that Kamala Harris looked practiced, like she was ready to parry these attacks on the Biden administration's record, on the economy, on Afghanistan, on her past positions as a presidential candidate in 2019. She had a few sentences that seemed like they were planned to brush them aside, and then she was on to talking about what she wanted to talk about, which was often needling Donald Trump on everything from his debate crowd sizes to the former Republican officials in the Trump administration who are now endorsing her or saying bad things about Donald Trump. And that was the challenge for Trump, is that he kept on taking that bait, I think, and not doing himself much good in the process.
But did he lay a finger on her on the economy?
I agree with Kyle. That was my impression of the evening. In the first question, when she was asked, are you better off? As you point out, she didn't answer the question. And I thought for sure Donald Trump was going to say she didn't answer the question. You know, and you should ask her again, ask her a follow-up. And he didn't. His answer was okay. But then I think to add on to Kyle, where I would say, instead of trying to bring it back to less abstractions, people struggling like he did in the beginning, saying can't afford bacon or cereal or something. You get into like Kamala Harris was talking about trade deficits. You know, people don't care about that. It doesn't affect their lives. And I think he let her off. And the worst thing is that he took the bait that she offered on several times, most notably on crowd sizes, and that got him off topic. He ended up defending his record, and not his economic or policy record, more his record of statements and so forth, than putting her on the spot. And she was, you know, in just the imagery, he was angry and sometimes kind of shouty, and she was cool and smiling.
Yeah, that matter of temperament held through most of the evening. She clearly got under his skin. But I want to listen to another exchange on the economy, this one on tariffs.
My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't.
Fascinating exchange here. We haven't had a real debate over tariffs in a long time, Kyle. Trump, of course, is leading with them. It's the biggest new idea he has in this sense that he did talk about them in 2016 and to some extent 2020, but he's really now pushing it hard. He's got that 10% across the board tariff. He's suggested it could be 20. He suggested 60% on China. And now he's saying hundreds of billions of dollars. And Harris clearly thinks this is an opening for her to talk about this $400,000 per middle-class family idea. That figure, I've looked into it. It's the highest estimate that anybody has about its impact. And it would hit only if you had the highest level of Trump tariffs across the economy. So it's really probably closer to between $1,000 and $2,000. But it would affect consumers, no question about it. Trump says no, only foreigners would pay. Well, that's not how tariffs work. But from the point of view of the debate, it seems to me that this is an illustration of how she put him on the defensive on what should have been his strongest area, the economy.
Yeah, and the trouble for Trump is that the economic evidence of his previous rounds of tariffs has been pretty clear and pretty consistent. So on the washing machines, for instance, tariffs on washing machines, the studies say that it raised the prices of washing machines, even those that are not subject to the tariff. And it also raised the prices of dryers because often washing machines and dryers are sold as a pair. So they have matching prices. Similar on the steel tariffs. There are arguments that it saved some steel jobs in the United States. On the other hand, there are far more jobs in the United States that depend on steel as an input, manufacturing, metal manufacturing, car manufacturing, and it hurt those industries. And so I think this is a mistake for him to be promising 20% across the board tariffs. On the other hand, he has a point that the Biden administration and Vice President Kamala Harris have not lifted the first round of Trump tariffs. And why is that if she doesn't believe in tariffs? And that's another example of a place where she got away with not answering that question.
Yeah, she totally ducked it. And there was time and again where she just didn't answer the question, moved on to an attack on Trump. Partly that's the mistake of the moderators for not following up. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have more on the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal Opinion podcast, Potomac Watch. We're on every day here with Kyle Peterson and Bill McGurn. Let's listen to another clip of Donald Trump talking about the 2020 election.
In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten.
Bill, every time they're talking about the election, Kamala Harris is just sitting there like the cat that ate the canary. She is just so happy about it.
Well, you know who knows that? Donald Trump's staff. I'm sure he was warned the whole time. I had the impression, now I wasn't there in the back room, so I don't know, but Donald Trump kind of believed his statements about Kamala Harris being stupid or low intelligence, and that this was going to be a cakewalk, after he dispatched Joe Biden. And I think all the staff knew what the traps were. That talking about the last election doesn't get him anywhere, like talking about his crowd size. It appeals to his pride and so forth. And he walked right into it and stayed there and looked angry. And again, the imagery was damning. And The effect was to let Kamala Harris off the hook. You remember at one point she was asked about her flip-flops, and she mentioned a few of them and said she would explain her reasons for all of them. She never did, never had to. She talked about fracking for a little, but she never had to get to the others. And there are many more. And it was more like a missed opportunity. I don't think it hurt Donald Trump with his supporters, but I don't think he gained him new supporters. And it was his one chance. You know, if he complains about the media bias, which is real, he should have seen this as one opportunity to break through that and call her to account for the policies she advocated and that the Biden administration has implemented. And every time it went off, as you suggest, Paul, it meant they weren't discussing those things. Kamala Harris just stood by and watched mostly.
She got him to talk about the past, talk about the 2020 election, talk about Joe Biden. A number of times that Donald Trump mentioned Joe Biden made me think that he's just very upset that Joe Biden is still not the nominee he's campaigning against. He got him to talk about the 2020 election, got him to talk about the Capitol riot, got him to talk about his criminal cases. Every time he's doing that, he's not focusing on the future, and he's not focusing on Kamala Harris, and it gives her the opportunity, which is part of her big theme. She wants to be the change candidate. She wants to make everybody forget that she's been in office for 4 years and talk about the future, the way forward, and let's turn the page. And every time Trump talks about the past, makes it harder to turn the page, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I think each of these candidates has a big vulnerability. For Trump, it's that swing voters, suburbanites worry that he's too erratic to put back in the Oval Office. For Kamala Harris, it's that those same voters may worry that she is far to the left of them and to the left of the country. And I think she made a concerted effort, a practiced effort. It was clear she had done her debate prep to address that vulnerability. Another example was this past support for mandatory buybacks of guns. She had 2 sentences where she said, Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking away anybody's guns. And then she moved on. And in contrast, I think Trump reinforced the idea in some of these swing voters' minds. You know, he's arguing with the moderator about whether immigrants are eating pets in some town in Ohio. He's saying the FBI crime statistics are a fraud and the jobs numbers corrections are a fraud. I think there's probably people at home thinking, if not, how can we put that guy back in the Oval Office? At least, what the heck is he talking about?
I did get an email from a swing voter who is a Republican, and she emailed me and just said, I don't think I can live with another 4 years of Trump after the debate. No fan of Harris, but that's just an anecdote. But Patrick Ruffini, Bill, the Republican strategist, I thought made a good point about Trump in the debates. What Trump is good at is highlighting the weaknesses of an opponent that everyone already knows and who's well-defined. Think of Hillary Clinton in 2016. People knew that what her weaknesses were. All he had to do was slap a label on, corrupt Hillary. And that worked because the public already knew her. Similar this year with Joe Biden and his age. That was clearly a liability, and Trump could zero in on that. But Harris is undefined for millions of Americans. So Trump needs a more focused critique that zeroes in on 2 or 3 of her real vulnerabilities, drives them home, and educates voters about them. And he's just not very good at that. He can't keep that focused discipline.
I think he can sometimes. I don't think that's a problem. I think it's more just he's self-indulgent. And I get the sense, this comes off a week when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. I think they just didn't take the opponent that seriously, thought it wasn't going to be a game. And then they got beaten. And I think that was kind of the same as Donald Trump. There's a lot people do know about her. They know she was in charge of the border, whether or not she was called border czar. She says it was root causes. Someone should ask her, what did you learn in 3 years that's going to improve the border? And she's evaded that. They generally didn't have a high opinion of her for when she appeared in public and gave these word salads. So there's a lot there to exploit. But again, Donald Trump was on the defensive most of the night and getting angry about it. So she was really let off scot-free. Again, go back to the point about she didn't answer the question on the economy. that he should have pressed her on? Are we better off or not? Yes or no? And how can your values remain the same if you flip-flopped on all these policies? Aren't you just a San Francisco liberal trying to pretend to be more moderate to get elected? And again, all the tough questions she evaded. In fairness, the moderators didn't help by fact-checking Trump and not doing it to Kamala Harris. But I think he did it to himself.